The rain hit Marcus Dalton's windshield like bullets. Smart men would pull over. He kept driving. 38 years old and still hadn't learned when to quit fighting losing battles. The kind of November storm that turned highways into rivers and good intentions into accidents. Sophie's volcano project materials sat secure in the truck bed, wrapped in the tarp he'd bought specifically for nights like this. His daughter was safe at Martha's house right now, probably explaining plate tectonics to his mother with the kind of enthusiasm most kids reserved for video games. The flashing lights cut through the gray curtain ahead. A vehicle crippled on the shoulder, hazards blinking their desperate rhythm into the storm. Marcus's foot found the brake before his mind caught up to the decision. Most drivers would accelerate past in weather that threatened to wash the asphalt clean off the road. Not their problem. His father's voice echoed from 20 years gone, the kind of lesson that stuck in bone marrow. You see someone needs help? You help, don't matter who they are or what it costs you. The Porsche Cayenne sat with its hood open like a broken jaw. $90,000 of German engineering reduced to expensive sculpture by a dead battery. The figure standing beside it wore clothes that cost more than Marcus made in a month. Designer suit soaked through, heels sinking into mud, long dark hair plastered against her back as water streamed off in rivulets. Marcus grabbed the jumper cables from behind his seat, the ones he kept for exactly this kind of situation, and stepped out into the deluge. The cold hit him like a fist. November rain in the Midwest carried a particular kind of misery, the temperature hovering just above freezing, promising winter without delivering it yet. He approached the Porsche, cables in hand, already calculating the connection points he'd need. The woman turned around. Marcus's heart stopped. Not metaphorically, not in the poetic sense people used for mild surprise. His chest seized up hard enough that his next breath came shallow and painful. The jumper cables trembled in his grip as he stared into eyes he'd spent a decade trying to forget. Green eyes that reminded him of spring grass after winter finally released its grip. Alexandra Sterling stood 5 feet away, looking exactly like the woman who'd destroyed him, and nothing like her at all. 10 years had added fine lines around those eyes, carved definition into cheekbones that had been softer at 26. The corporate armor she wore now, the suit, the watch that probably cost more than his truck, the way she held herself with the confidence of someone who owned boardrooms, all of it was new. But underneath, he could still see traces of the college student who'd fallen asleep during movies with her head on his shoulder, who'd laughed at his terrible jokes, who'd said yes when he proposed in the park where they'd had their first real conversation. Her lips parted. No sound came out initially, just visible shock registering across features trained to reveal nothing. Marcus found his voice first, pushed words through the constriction in his throat. Battery? Professional, distant, like they were strangers instead of two people who'd planned a wedding together, picked out china patterns, argued about whether to honeymoon in Colorado or Maine. Alex's composure cracked for half a second. Something raw flashed across her face before the mask slammed back into place. Marcus. Not a question, a statement weighted with 10 years of unspoken history. The rain kept falling. Marcus moved to the Porsche's hood, muscle memory taking over when his brain threatened to shut down completely. Pop the hood, identify the battery terminals, connect positive to positive, negative to ground. Simple mechanical task his hands could perform while his mind reeled. I didn't expect, Alex started. Where's your vehicle? Marcus cut her off, nodding toward his F-150 idling 20 feet back. She followed him to his truck without another word. He connected the cables with practiced efficiency, not looking at her, focusing on the task with the kind of intensity usually reserved for complex construction problems. The storm provided cover for the silence, rain hammering metal and pavement with enough violence to drown out the screaming in his head. 3 minutes. That's all it took for the Porsche's engine to turn over, roaring to life with mechanical indifference to the emotional wreckage surrounding it. Marcus disconnected the cables, movements sharp and precise, still refusing to meet her gaze directly. Alex's hand touched his arm as he turned to leave. Just brief contact through wet fabric, but it burned. Her voice came out smaller than he'd ever heard it. Marcus, I know you're the last person who wants to see me. You're just someone who needed a jump. The words emerged colder than he'd intended, frost coating each syllable. He watched something flicker across her face. Pain, maybe regret, but she recovered with the discipline of someone trained to hide weakness. Can we talk? Please? Marcus coiled the jumper cables with deliberate care, buying himself seconds to think. Every instinct screamed at him to get in his truck and drive away, to protect himself from whatever fresh hell this encounter might unleash. But another part of him, the part that had spent a decade wondering why, that had built an entire marriage on the foundation of not being enough for this woman, wanted answers. We talked 10 years ago. You said everything you needed to say then. He met her eyes finally, let her see exactly what her leaving had cost him. The year of barely functioning. The marriage to Claire that had been comfortable and safe and utterly devoid of the fire he'd felt with Alex. The careful construction of a life designed specifically to never hurt this badly again. Alex flinched. Actually flinched, like his words had physical weight. I was wrong. 2 words that should have meant everything. Marcus found they meant nothing at all. You don't get to ask for forgiveness in the rain and expect it to wash everything clean. He turned toward his truck. Alex called after him, voice nearly lost in the storm, but he kept walking. In the rearview mirror as he pulled away, she stood beside the Porsche with one hand pressed to her chest, watching him disappear into the gray curtain just like she'd disappeared from his life a decade ago. His phone buzzed before he'd made it 3 miles. Sophie texting from Martha's cell. Did you remember to buy milk? Grandma says we're out. The mundane reality snapped him back. Milk, homework, getting Sophie to school on time tomorrow. The careful routine he'd built since Claire walked out, leaving him with a 6-year-old and a mortgage he could barely afford. Alexandra Sterling had no place in that world. She'd made that choice a long time ago. Martha's house smelled like cinnamon rolls, the kind of comfort that came from decades of practiced hospitality. His mother looked up from where she sat with Sophie at the kitchen table, multiplication problems spread between them like a battlefield. The moment Martha's eyes met his, her expression shifted from grandmother mode to mother who knows something happened. Sophie launched herself at Marcus with 8-year-old enthusiasm, all skinny arms and gap-toothed grin. Daddy, I got all my problems right, even the hard ones with the 9s. Marcus caught her, swung her up despite muscles that had spent all day hauling lumber and concrete blocks at the Morrison construction site. The physical weight of his daughter grounded him, pulled him back from the edge of whatever spiral seeing Alex had triggered. That's my brilliant girl. Knew you could do it. But Sophie possessed her father's stubbornness, wrapped in an 8-year-old's unfiltered perception. She studied his face with unsettling intensity. You look sad. Did something bad happen? Just tired, kiddo. Long day. Martha stood, moving to pour coffee without asking if he wanted it. That kind of maternal instinct that read trouble from across a room. Sophie, honey, go check if you packed everything for school tomorrow. The girl's eyes narrowed. She knew when adults wanted to talk without her. But she obeyed, dragging her backpack toward the living room with exaggerated slowness that suggested eavesdropping might occur. The moment Sophie was out of earshot, Martha fixed Marcus with the look that had extracted confessions from him since childhood. What happened? Marcus accepted the coffee, letting heat seep into fingers still cold from the rain. Ran into someone. On the highway. Car trouble. Martha's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. 20 years of reading her son's moods, of knowing when he was dancing around the truth. Someone got a name? Alexandra Sterling. The coffee cup Martha had been lifting froze halfway to her lips. When she set it down, the porcelain clicked against the table with unusual force. That woman, after all these years. Not a question, an accusation directed at the universe for its terrible timing. Marcus stared into his own cup, watching steam rise and dissipate. Battery died. I helped. That's all. That's never all with her. The observation hit too close to home. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Different number this time. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Claire. His ex-wife had impeccable timing for making already bad days worse. I need to take this. He stepped onto Martha's porch, the rain having softened to drizzle. Claire's voice came through sharp and tight, the tone that meant trouble. Sophie mentioned someone named Miss Sterling when I picked her up last week. Want to explain who that is? Marcus's mind raced. Sophie had met Alex? When? The timeline didn't... Wait. Last Tuesday. Alex must have stopped by the Morrison site for something. Maybe talked to Sophie when Martha brought her by after school to see the renovation work. 5 minutes, tops. Nothing significant. Nobody important. She needed help with her car, that's all. Don't lie to me, Marcus. I Googled her. Alexandra Sterling, Chief Security Officer at Sterling Wade Security Consulting. Your ex-fiancé, who's now worth $40 million. The dollar amount shouldn't have surprised him. Alex had always been brilliant, driven, capable of building empires when she set her mind to it. But hearing it stated so bluntly crystallized exactly how far their paths had diverged. It was a coincidence. I helped jump her battery in the rain. Sophie wasn't even there. But she's met her. My daughter has met the woman who destroyed you. Claire's voice climbed in pitch, each word sharpened by the kind of anger that came from old wounds reopening. Keep her away from Sophie. I mean it. Or I'm calling my lawyer about modifying the custody arrangement. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He stood on the porch, phone still pressed to his ear, feeling the walls closing in. Alexandra Sterling had been back in his life for less than 2 hours, and already the carefully constructed stability he'd built for Sophie was fracturing. Inside, Martha waited with the expression that said she'd heard enough through the window to know things had gotten complicated. Claire's threatening custody? She'll calm down. She always does. But even as he spoke the words, Marcus didn't believe them. Claire had been reasonable since the divorce, cooperative even, both of them prioritizing Sophie's well-being over their own resentments. The mention of Alex had changed something fundamental in that equation. The weekend crawled past with excruciating slowness. Marcus threw himself into work at the Morrison construction site, a factory renovation that was already 3 weeks behind schedule and hemorrhaging money. The kind of project that could make or break a small construction company, especially with Jim Morrison breathing down everyone's necks about deadlines and budgets. Frank Cooper caught him measuring the same support beam for the 3rd time Monday morning, getting different numbers with each attempt. The crew leader had been in construction longer than Marcus had been alive, possessed the kind of weathered competence that came from 40 years of hard labor and harder lessons. He didn't miss much. You sick or something? Been off all morning. Marcus set down the tape measure, rubbed his face with hands that ached from gripping tools too tightly. Didn't sleep well. Claire's pushing for a custody modification. That much was true. The legal papers had arrived by courier Sunday afternoon, delivered with a kind of impersonal efficiency that made serious threats feel routine. Claire's lawyer had moved fast, filed preliminary motions that suggested this wasn't a bluff. Frank's expression darkened. He'd been through his own custody battle 15 years back, knew exactly how ugly these things could get. What's her angle? Claims I'm exposing Sophie to unstable influences. That's garbage. You're the most stable person I know. Kid's lucky to have you. The words should have helped. Instead, they just highlighted how precarious everything felt. Stability was an illusion maintained through constant vigilance, and the moment you let your guard down, the universe reminded you exactly how fragile it all was. Ryan Nash approached from across the site, 24 years old and already developing the permanent squint that came from years in bright sunlight without proper eye protection. The kid had been with Marcus's crew for 3 years, showed real promise when he wasn't distracted by whatever personal crisis currently consumed him. Lately, that had been more often than not. "Boss, got a minute?" Something in Ryan's voice made Marcus's radar ping. He stepped away from Frank, led Ryan toward the trailer that served as temporary office space for the project. Inside, Ryan's composure crumbled. The kid couldn't meet Marcus's eyes, focused instead on his own hands twisting together. "I'm in trouble. Bad trouble." Marcus waited. Silence was often the best interrogation technique. People filled it with confessions when given enough space. "I've got gambling debts. $12,000 to a bookie named Ricky Salazar. He's not the patient type." The number hit Marcus like a punch. 12,000 on a construction worker's salary was catastrophic. The kind of debt that led to desperate decisions. "How long you been gambling?" 2 years. Started small, just sports betting with the guys. Then I got into poker games, thought I could win it back. Kept losing instead. Ryan's voice cracked on the last words. Marcus recognized the shame there, the particular humiliation that came from drowning and knowing you'd jumped into the water yourself. "Salazar's giving me until Friday. Says if I don't pay, he'll—" Ryan broke off, whatever threat Salazar had made too terrifying to speak aloud. Marcus pulled out his wallet, counted what cash he had. $230. Not nearly enough, but it was what he could spare after Sophie's school expenses, the mortgage payment due next week, the truck repair he'd been putting off for 2 months. He pulled out $2,000 from his emergency fund, the money he'd been saving for Sophie's birthday next month, for the telescope she'd been asking about since summer. "Take this. It's not much, but it buys you time." Ryan stared at the bills like Marcus had handed him a live grenade. "Boss, I can't. We look out for our own, but this is the last time. Get help. Real help. There are programs for gambling addiction." Ryan took the money with shaking hands, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "Thank you. I'll pay you back, I swear." "I know you will. Now get back to work before Frank notices we're both missing." After Ryan left, Marcus sat alone in the trailer, staring at his now depleted bank account on his phone. The emergency fund he'd built over 6 months, gone in 5 minutes. But what else could he do? Ryan was his responsibility. The whole crew was. That's what leadership meant, carrying weight so others didn't have to. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, but the area code was local. Marcus answered out of habit. "Mr. Dalton? This is Alexandra Sterling. I hope this isn't a bad time." Her voice sent electricity down his spine, the kind of visceral reaction he'd thought he'd buried years ago. Professional, controlled, nothing like the raw vulnerability she'd shown in the rain 3 days ago. "How did you get this number?" "I'm a security consultant. Finding contact information is part of the job. Marcus should have been angry at the invasion of privacy. Instead, he felt something uncomfortably close to anticipation. "What do you want?" "I need to speak with you about a professional matter. Can we meet this afternoon? I'll come to your site." Every instinct screamed that seeing her again was a mistake. The smart move was to refuse, maintain distance, protect the walls he'd built. "Fine, but make it quick. We're behind schedule." She arrived 2 hours later in the Porsche, parking among the crew's beat-up trucks like an exotic bird that had accidentally landed in a junkyard. The juxtaposition was jarring. $90,000 of German engineering surrounded by vehicles held together with duct tape and prayer. Marcus watched through the trailer window as Alex emerged. Gone was the soaked executive from the highway. This version wore designer jeans that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment, paired with a leather jacket that screamed expensive casualness. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. Frank noticed her approach, whistled low. "Boss, who's the goddess in the Porsche?" "Client, stay focused on the beam installation." But the entire crew had stopped working, every man on site tracking Alex's progress across the muddy construction zone. She navigated the terrain with surprising competence for someone in boots that cost 4 figures, avoiding puddles and debris with the spatial awareness of someone trained to assess environments quickly. Marcus met her outside the trailer, maintaining physical distance, arms crossed over his chest in a posture he recognized as defensive, even as he adopted it. "You said professional. Make it professional." Alex pulled out an iPad, tapped the screen with fingers that bore no wedding ring. Marcus noticed and hated himself for noticing. Morrison Construction hired Sterling Wade Security Consulting to investigate a theft. $50,000 in equipment stolen from your warehouse project last month. The words hit him like cold water. She wasn't here about them. She was here because her company, her multi-million-dollar corporate security firm, had been contracted to investigate his employer. "You're investigating Morrison Construction?" "I'm investigating the theft, which means interviewing your crew, examining site security protocols, determining how equipment disappeared from a supposedly secure location." Marcus's jaw tightened. The theft had been a black mark on the entire company, the kind of loss that threatened contracts and reputations. Jim Morrison had been furious, demanded answers that nobody could provide. Security footage showed nothing useful. Equipment had simply vanished overnight. "When I saw your name on the crew roster, I should have recused myself." Alex met his eyes directly, no flinching, no apology. "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." The admission hung between them. Marcus understood what she wasn't saying. That professional ethics demanded distance. That investigating someone you had personal history with created conflicts of interest. That she'd chosen to stay on the case anyway. Why? "Because I'm good at my job. Because Morrison Construction deserves real answers. Because..." She broke off. Whatever she'd been about to say, swallowed back behind professional composure. Marcus finished for her. "Because this gives you an excuse to be around me." Pink touched her cheeks, barely visible but definitely there. He'd rattled her. The woman who commanded boardrooms and solved complex security breaches could be shaken by simple truth. "That's presumptuous." "That's never all this is with you." The phrase landed with weight. Alex's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, long enough for Marcus to see the real woman underneath the corporate armor. "I need to interview your crew. Starting today." "Fine. But stay objective. These are good men who work hard for honest pay. Don't come in here with assumptions about blue-collar workers being thieves." Something flashed in Alex's eyes. Hurt, maybe anger at the implication. "I would never. Your company bills $500 an hour for consulting. These men make 32. There's a power imbalance here, and I won't let you use it against them. The corporate investigator disappeared, replaced by the woman he'd once known. Her voice came out softer, stripped of professional polish. I know what it's like to be underestimated because of where you come from. You should remember that. She was right. Alex had grown up in a trailer park on the wrong side of Dayton, fought her way through college on scholarships and stubbornness. The wealth and polish were earned, built from nothing through sheer force of will. He'd loved that about her once, the hunger, the drive to prove everyone wrong. Then prove it. Treat my crew with respect. I will. She spent the next 3 hours interviewing everyone on site. Marcus watched from a distance, unable to focus on his own work. Alex approached each man with the same professional courtesy, asked questions that showed real understanding of construction processes. Frank came away from his interview grudgingly impressed. She knows her stuff. Asked about load-bearing calculations for the warehouse shelving, whether weight distribution could have caused collapse that made theft easier. Smart questions. But when Alex interviewed Ryan, Marcus noticed the change in her demeanor. The kid had been jumpy all week, and under Alex's questioning, he became visibly nervous, sweating despite the November chill, unable to maintain eye contact, answers coming too fast or too slow. Alex emerged from that interview with an expression Marcus couldn't read. She found him checking inventory near the supply truck. Ryan Nash is hiding something. The accusation landed like a punch. Marcus forced himself to stay calm, not to react defensively, even though every instinct screamed to protect his crew. Ryan's got personal problems. Doesn't make him a thief. His alibi for the night of the warehouse theft doesn't hold up. Claims he was home with his girlfriend, but according to social media, they broke up 2 weeks before the incident. Marcus's stomach dropped. Ryan had lied. The question was whether he'd lied to protect himself from embarrassment about the breakup, or because he'd been involved in something worse. That doesn't prove anything. No, but it's a thread. And in my experience, pulling threads usually unravels something. She was good. Marcus could see the FBI training in how she built cases, connected disparate pieces of information into coherent narratives. Part of him wanted to warn Ryan, to give the kid time to get his story straight. The other part, the part that valued truth above loyalty, knew that if Ryan had done something wrong, he needed to face consequences. Do what you need to do. But Alex, the use of her first name seemed to startle them both. Too familiar, too intimate for the professional distance they were supposed to maintain. Find the truth, not a convenient scapegoat. That's all I've ever looked for. She turned to leave, then paused, looked back over her shoulder with an expression that was pure vulnerability underneath the executive polish. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About showing up like this, about the investigation, about all of it. Sorry doesn't change anything. I know. But I needed you to hear it anyway. After she drove away in the Porsche, Frank appeared at Marcus's elbow. That's the woman, isn't it? The one who got away? Marcus didn't bother denying it. Frank had been around too long, seen too much to be fooled by deflection. Yeah. She's trouble, boss. Rich, beautiful, smart. Exactly the kind of trouble that breaks a man twice. I know. But you're going to see where this goes anyway. Marcus wanted to deny it, to claim he'd learned his lesson, that he was smarter now than he'd been at 28. The lie wouldn't form. That evening, after dropping Sophie at Claire's for her scheduled overnight, Marcus's phone rang. Alex's number appeared on screen. He stared at it for 3 rings before answering. I need to ask you some questions. Off the record. There is no off the record between us. Please, Just coffee. 1 hour. I promise to keep it professional. Marcus knew agreeing was a mistake. Knew that coffee would lead to conversation, conversation to connection, connection to the kind of pain he'd spent a decade avoiding. He said yes anyway. Tony's Italian. Tomorrow at 7. Thank you, Marcus. I'll be there. The call ended. Marcus sat in his truck outside Claire's house, watching through the window as Sophie showed her mother something on her tablet, both of them laughing. His daughter's life was good, stable, predictable, everything he'd worked to build since the divorce. Alexandra Sterling threatened all of it. The smart move was to cancel, to maintain boundaries, to protect what he'd built. Marcus started the engine and drove home, knowing he'd be at Tony's Italian tomorrow night, knowing it was a mistake, unable to stop himself anyway. Tony's Italian occupied a converted Victorian house on 5th Street, all exposed brick and trailing ivy that made it look like something transplanted from Tuscany. The owner greeted Marcus at the door with the familiar enthusiasm of someone who'd known him for 15 years. "Marcus, haven't seen you in too long. You finally bringing a lady friend?" "Something like that, Tony." The older man's eyes sparkled with matchmaker delight as he showed Marcus to a corner table that offered privacy without feeling isolated. Marcus ordered a beer and checked his watch. 6:55. If Alex was the same person she'd been 10 years ago, she'd arrive early, constitutionally incapable of being late. At 6:53, the door chimed. Alex stepped inside, wearing jeans and a dark sweater, hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in the severe style she'd worn at the construction site. Without the corporate armor, she looked younger, more like the woman he'd fallen for when they were both too young to understand what forever meant. She spotted him, and something complicated flickered across her face. Relief, mixed with fear, mixed with hope. The professional investigator had been left in the Porsche. This was just Alex, vulnerable and uncertain in ways that made Marcus's carefully constructed defenses waver. Tony appeared with wine before she'd fully sat down, his romantic instincts in overdrive. Alex accepted the glass with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You actually came." Her voice carried genuine surprise, like she'd expected him to stand her up, leave her waiting as karmic payback for leaving him a decade ago. "I keep my word, even when I probably shouldn't." The barb landed. Alex flinched, took a sip of wine to buy herself composure time. "I deserved that." "You deserved worse." But his tone had softened despite himself. Sitting across from her in warm lighting, watching the way she worried the stem of her wine glass with nervous fingers, Marcus felt the anger that had sustained him for so long beginning to crack around the edges. "You wanted to explain. So explain." Alex's hands trembled slightly as she set down the wine glass. Whatever she was about to say clearly cost her, required the kind of courage that had nothing to do with FBI training or corporate boardrooms. "My parents divorced when I was 12. Watched my mother completely lose herself in that marriage. Everything she was, her dreams, her identity, her friends, it all revolved around my father. When he left for his secretary, Mom didn't just lose a husband. She lost her entire sense of self." The story was familiar. Alex had told him pieces of it during their relationship, but never with this level of raw honesty. "She spent 2 years in depression so deep, I thought we might lose her. I had to grow up fast, take care of her when she couldn't take care of herself. And I made a promise to 12-year-old Alex. Never become that. Never let someone else define who you are." Marcus listened without interrupting, let her build the narrative at her own pace. "Then I met you. 24 years old, sitting in that campus coffee shop with construction textbooks spread everywhere, looking completely overwhelmed. Despite everything, the memory made Marcus smile. He'd been taking night classes while working full-time for Morrison Construction, trying to get the certifications that would move him from laborer to foreman. Alex had been studying for the LSAT, drowning in practice tests and anxiety about her future. You asked if the seat across from me was taken. I said no. We talked for 6 hours about everything and nothing, and when you left, I knew something fundamental had shifted. Alex's voice grew softer, each word chosen with care. We were engaged within a year, planning a wedding, talking about kids, looking at houses we couldn't afford, and somewhere in all that planning, panic set in. Not about you, about me, about losing myself the way my mother had. So you ran. The accusation held less heat than before. Understanding didn't erase hurt, but it provided context. I ran. Told myself I needed to establish my career first, build my identity independent of anyone else. Joined the FBI, worked myself to exhaustion, proved I could be successful on my own terms. She met his eyes directly, no flinching from the pain visible there. And I was miserable. Every promotion felt empty. Every success rang hollow. I dated men who meant nothing and forgot them the moment they left. Convinced myself I'd made the right choice, even as the evidence mounted that I'd destroyed the best thing in my life. The waiter appeared, asking about dinner. They ordered without looking at menus, going through the motions of civilized dining while emotional chaos roared beneath the surface. Once alone again, Marcus asked the question that had haunted him for a decade. Did you ever love me? Or was I just a comfortable mistake you corrected before it was too late? Pain flashed across Alex's face, sharp and immediate. I loved you so much it terrified me. That was the problem. You were everything I wanted and everything I was afraid of becoming. Loving you meant risking the kind of loss I'd watched destroy my mother. So you chose to inflict that loss instead of risk it. Yes, and spent 10 years regretting it. Marcus's beer sat forgotten, condensation pooling around the base. Across from him, Alex looked smaller than he'd ever seen her, stripped of corporate polish and professional competence, just a woman admitting to catastrophic mistakes. I married someone else, Claire. Sweet, uncomplicated, wanted the same things I did. House, kid, stable life. I know. I saw the announcement on Facebook. The admission surprised him. Alex had been following his life from a distance, watching him build a future that didn't include her. Did you love her? Honesty required truth, even when truth was ugly. I cared about her, respected her, thought maybe that would be enough. It wasn't. Marcus took a long pull from his beer, liquid courage for the confession that followed. The whole marriage I waited to feel something close to what I felt with you. That electric connection, the sense that I'd found my person. It never came. Claire knew it. We pretended for 6 years because we had Sophie, because divorce seemed like admitting failure. You taught me what love feels like. Then you taught me what losing it feels like. I'm not sure which lesson hurt more. The words hung between them, raw and honest and devastating. Alex's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she blinked them back with the discipline of someone who'd spent years not showing weakness. Food arrived, chicken parmesan for her, lasagna for him. Neither made a move to eat. The revelation had shifted something between them, changed the atmosphere from confrontational to dangerous in ways Marcus couldn't fully process. Why are you back? Not just at Morrison Construction, but in this town specifically. Your company has offices in 6 major cities. Alex's composure wavered. Whatever she was about to say clearly terrified her more than confessing to abandonment and regret. I relocated Sterling Wade headquarters here 2 years ago. Marcus's stomach dropped. 2 years. While he was going through his divorce, while he was building custody arrangements with Claire, while he was establishing routines with Sophie, Alex had been here. In the same city, close enough to run into at any moment. Why? Because I knew you were here. The confession came out barely above a whisper, but it hit with the force of a shout. I've been keeping tabs, nothing invasive, just occasional social media checks, asking mutual acquaintances how you were doing. Saw when you got married, when Sophie was born, when your relationship status changed to divorced. Marcus's hands clenched into fists under the table. Fury and something dangerously close to hope warred in his chest. You've been stalking me for 10 years? Not stalking, just making sure you were okay. Telling myself I was happy for you, that you'd moved on and found what you needed. But I was lying. When the opportunity came to relocate headquarters, I had offers from Portland, San Diego, Chicago. All of them made more financial sense. Better markets, lower overhead, stronger client bases. Alex's voice grew stronger, commitment replacing uncertainty. I chose here because I needed to know if what we had was real. If the decade I'd spent regretting my choice was justified, or if I'd built it up in my memory to excuse my loneliness. Marcus wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at the manipulation, the calculated decision to insert herself back into his orbit without permission. But underneath the anger was something more complicated. The realization that she'd spent a decade hurting too, that her success and wealth hadn't protected her from the consequences of her choices. So the Morrison Construction investigation was assigned randomly. When I saw your name on the crew roster, I should have recused myself immediately, sent another investigator, maintained professional distance. But you didn't. No, because I'm selfish. Because I wanted an excuse to see you, to talk to you, to find out if any spark of what we had still existed. Marcus pushed his untouched lasagna away, appetite destroyed by revelations that rewrote his understanding of the past 2 years. You don't get to do that. You don't get to use a professional investigation as relationship therapy. My job is on the line here. Morrison Construction's reputation, the livelihoods of good men who depend on that company. I know. You're right. I'll assign the case to my partner tomorrow, remove myself completely from... No. The word surprised them both. Alex's eyes widened, searching his face for explanation. Don't reassign it. You're good at your job. Morrison Construction deserves the best investigator. Just keep it professional. Find who stole that equipment and clear my crew's names. Relief flooded Alex's expression, followed immediately by something that looked like guilt. I can do that. Professional. Nothing else. They both knew it was a lie. Sitting across from each other in warm lighting, the weight of shared history pressing down, professional distance was already a lost cause. But saying the words gave them permission to pretend, to maintain the fiction that they could navigate this without destroying each other again. Marcus's phone buzzed. He ignored it initially, but it buzzed again. And again. Emergency pattern that meant something was wrong. He pulled it out, saw Frank's name on the screen, and felt dread settle in his stomach. I need to take this. Frank's voice came through tight with stress. Boss, we got a problem. Big one. Another theft at the current site. 30,000 in copper wiring, gone. Police are here, Morrison's losing his mind, and they're talking about shutting down the whole project. The bottom dropped out of Marcus's world. He looked at Alex, saw her face change as she read his expression, and understood that whatever fragile moment they'd been building had just shattered. "I'm on my way." He stood, threw cash on the table to cover both meals. Alex stood too, already pulling out her phone, investigator mode sliding back into place like armor. "What happened?" "Another theft. My current site. Tonight. While we were here." The implication hung between them. While Marcus had been occupied with dinner, while Alex had been confessing to decade-long surveillance, someone had been stealing from Morrison Construction again. And Ryan Nash's nervous behavior, his gambling debts, his lies about his whereabouts, all of it pointed toward involvement that Marcus had been too distracted to see. "I'm coming with you." "Alex, this is my investigation now. If there's a pattern, if tonight's theft connects to the warehouse incident, I need to see the scene immediately." She was right, and Marcus was too shaken to argue. They drove separately to the construction site, Marcus pushing his F-150 harder than he should have, mind racing through implications. If Ryan was involved, if Marcus had been too loyal to see it, if his judgment had been compromised by personal drama, Jim Morrison would have every right to fire him. The crew would lose faith. Frank would be disappointed. Everything Marcus had built over 15 years could collapse. The site was chaos when they arrived. Police cars, crime scene tape, Morrison pacing near the trailer with the kind of fury that came from financial losses the company couldn't absorb. Frank stood with the rest of the crew, all of them looking shell-shocked. Alex emerged from her Porsche transformed back into the corporate investigator, all business and controlled competence. She approached the lead detective, flashed credentials that gave her access civilian investigators shouldn't have, and within minutes was examining the scene with the kind of systematic precision that came from FBI training. Morrison spotted Marcus, stalked over with rage radiating from every line of his body. "This is on you. Your crew, your responsibility, your failure to maintain security." "Jim, save it. Insurance won't cover 2 thefts in 2 months. We're over budget, behind schedule, and now we're down another $30,000 in materials we can't replace. The client's threatening to pull the contract." Marcus absorbed the verbal assault without defending himself. Morrison was right. As foreman, security was his responsibility. He should have seen this coming, should have noticed the pattern, should have done something to prevent it. Alex appeared at his elbow, notepad in hand, every inch the professional investigator. "Mr. Morrison, I need to interview everyone who was on site today, including Mr. Dalton." Morrison's eyes narrowed, tracking between Marcus and Alex with the kind of perception that came from decades in business. "You two know each other." Not a question, an accusation. "We have history, but I'm keeping this investigation separate from personal matters." Morrison's laugh held no humor. "Lady, I don't care about your history. I care about my company bleeding money. Find out who's stealing from me, or I'm pulling your contract and hiring someone who can actually deliver results." He stalked away, leaving Marcus and Alex standing in the wreckage of the evening's revelations. Around them, police processed the scene. Frank herded the crew toward their vehicles. The November night pressed down with the weight of consequences neither of them had anticipated. Alex touched Marcus's arm, the contact brief but grounding. "I'm sorry. For everything. For tonight. For the investigation. For all of it. You said you wanted to find the truth. So find it. Because right now, my job's on the line. My crew's reputation is destroyed, and I have a daughter who depends on me to keep it together. I will. I promise." Marcus climbed into his truck, watched Alex in his rearview mirror as she returned to the crime scene, already pulling out her phone to call in her team. The dinner at Tony's Italian felt like it had happened in another lifetime, not 2 hours ago. All those confessions and revelations and dangerous possibilities, none of it mattered now. What mattered was proving his crew's innocence, protecting their livelihoods, salvaging what remained of Morrison Construction's reputation. And somewhere in the middle of it all was Ryan Nash, 24 years old and drowning in gambling debts, who'd lied about his whereabouts and couldn't meet Marcus's eyes. The kid who Marcus had loaned $2,000 to just yesterday, trying to buy him time against pressure from a bookie who ran illegal operations. Marcus pulled out his phone, called Ryan's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. A 3rd time. Voicemail. Fear crystallized into certainty. Ryan was involved. The question was how deep, and whether Marcus's loyalty to his crew had blinded him to a betrayal that was about to cost him everything he'd worked to build. Morning arrived with the kind of cruel clarity that made yesterday's chaos feel inevitable. Marcus had managed 3 hours of sleep before his phone erupted with messages from the crew, from Morrison, from Frank, demanding to know what the hell happened and how they were supposed to proceed. The construction site sat idle, yellow police tape fluttering in wind that carried the sharp edge of approaching winter. Alex's sedan was already parked near the trailer when Marcus arrived at 6:30. She stood beside a heavy-set man in his 50s, wearing a detective shield on his belt, both of them examining the section of fence that had been cut to access the copper wiring storage. Professional. Clinical. The woman who'd confessed to a decade of longing over Italian food had vanished, replaced by an investigator who moved through crime scenes with the efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. Detective Williams had the worn-down look of a career cop who'd seen too much and expected the worst from everyone. He acknowledged Marcus with a nod that held no warmth. "Mr. Dalton, need to ask you some questions about site security protocols." "Whatever you need." They went through the timeline methodically. Who had keys to the equipment cage? Who knew the security code? When the last shift ended? Whether cameras had captured anything useful before being disabled? Marcus answered each question with growing dread, watching Alex take notes without meeting his eyes, maintaining the professional distance they'd agreed to maintain. The cameras had been spray-painted over at 10:47 p.m., according to the timestamp on the last clear frame. The fence had been cut sometime between then and 2 a.m., when the night watchman made his rounds and discovered the theft. $30,000 in copper wiring, gone in under 4 hours, removed with the kind of efficiency that suggested planning and inside knowledge. Williams flipped through his notebook, landed on a page with Ryan Nash's name circled in red. This crew member, the one with gambling debts? Where was he last night? Marcus's jaw tightened. Ryan's phone had gone straight to voicemail all night, the kid's truck absent from his apartment complex when Marcus drove by at midnight. Every protective instinct screamed to defend his crew member, but the evidence was mounting toward a conclusion Marcus didn't want to accept. "I don't know. He didn't answer when I called." Alex finally looked up from her notes, something complicated passing across her features before the professional mask reasserted itself. "Mr. Nash has financial motivation. He's been evasive about his whereabouts during previous thefts, and he has the technical knowledge to disable security systems." Williams grunted agreement, already reaching for his phone. "I'll bring him in for questioning. If he's involved, we'll get it out of him." Frank appeared from the direction of the parked crew trucks, his weathered face tight with controlled anger, the kind that came from watching something you'd built over decades threatened by circumstances beyond your control. "Boss, the guys are asking what happens now. Do we work or wait for Morrison to make a call?" "We wait. Site's a crime scene until Williams clears it." "And Ryan?" The question carried weight beyond its 4 words. Frank knew about the gambling debts. Small crews had no real secrets. And he was asking whether Marcus still believed in the kid's innocence, or whether loyalty had reached its breaking point. If he did this, he faces consequences. but I'm not throwing him to the wolves based on speculation. Alex stepped closer, close enough that Marcus caught the scent of her perfume underneath the professional veneer. The same vanilla and something floral she'd worn a decade ago, familiar enough to trigger sense memories he'd thought buried. Her voice dropped low, meant only for him. I need to interview him before Williams does. There are questions I can ask that a detective can't. Ways to approach this that don't involve Miranda rights and lawyers.
You think he'll talk to you? I think he's terrified, and terrified people make mistakes. Let me work him before this becomes official. Marcus should have objected on principle, should have insisted Ryan get legal representation, that proper procedures be followed, that the kid's rights be protected. Instead, he pulled out his phone, sent Ryan a text that was equal parts summons and lifeline. Alex wants to talk. Come to the site. Now.
20 minutes crawled past. Marcus busied himself with inventory checks that didn't need doing. Anything to avoid watching Alex prepare her interrogation strategy. Frank kept the crew occupied with equipment maintenance, all of them moving through familiar tasks while uncertainty hung over the site like fog. Ryan's truck appeared at 7:15, the kid's face visible through the windshield even from a distance. Pale, drawn, the look of someone who hadn't slept and wouldn't be sleeping any time soon. He approached Marcus and Alex with the gait of a condemned man walking toward execution. Alex gestured toward the trailer without preamble, her FBI training evident in how she controlled the physical space, positioned herself between Ryan and the door, established dominance before the first question. Inside, she didn't waste time with preliminaries. Ryan Nash, 24 years old, 3 years with Morrison Construction, currently owes $15,000 to Ricky Salazar, who runs illegal gambling operations out of a bar on 7th Street. Ryan's face went from pale to gray. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the desk. How do you... I'm good at my job. Your girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, Casey Morrison, posted about the breakup on Facebook 2 weeks before the warehouse theft. So your alibi about being home with her that night was a lie.
Want to revise your statement?
The FBI technique was brutal in its efficiency. Establish facts the subject thought were hidden. Prove you know more than they assumed. Watch them crumble under the weight of their own deceptions. Ryan's voice came out barely above a whisper. I wasn't involved in the warehouse theft. I swear to God. But you were involved in something. The question is what, and whether lying to me makes it worse, or if telling the truth now buys you any leniency. Marcus watched from near the door, torn between protecting his crew member and letting justice run its course. Ryan had lied. The gambling debts were real. The connection to Salazar, a man Marcus knew by reputation as someone who dealt in stolen goods along with illegal betting, created a narrative that was becoming harder to ignore. Alex leaned forward, voice shifting from interrogator to something almost compassionate. You're drowning, Ryan. I can see it. The debts, the pressure, the threats about what happens if you don't pay. Someone offered you a way out, didn't they? Information in exchange for debt forgiveness. Ryan broke. The collapse was total. Shoulders shaking as tears cut tracks through the construction dust on his face. I didn't steal anything. I swear. But Salazar, he knew where I worked. Started asking questions about the sites, what kind of security we had, where valuable materials were stored. I thought he was just curious, making conversation. Alex's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw the subtle shift in her posture that meant she'd gotten what she needed. When did these conversations start? 2 months ago, before the warehouse theft. He'd bring it up casual-like, buy me drinks, act friendly. Then, after the warehouse got hit,
He came to me directly, said he knew I'd been helping, that I could either keep helping or he'd make sure everyone knew I was involved.
The confession spilled out in a rush, Ryan's voice climbing toward hysteria. I gave him the security code for this site, told him about the camera positions, when the night watchman made rounds. He said if I cooperated, my debts would be forgiven. I was desperate. I didn't think. You didn't think about the consequences to your crew, to Mr. Dalton, who vouched for you, to Morrison Construction's reputation. Alex's words landed with surgical precision, each one calculated to reinforce the magnitude of Ryan's betrayal. Marcus felt something fundamental crack in his chest. The loyalty he'd shown Ryan, the $2,000 he'd loaned, the character references and second chances, all of it thrown away for the empty promise of debt relief. Ryan turned toward Marcus, desperation written across his features. Boss, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to survive. You call Detective Williams, right now. You tell him everything you just told us, and then you pray the DA offers you a deal for cooperation. Marcus's voice came out flat, stripped of emotion. Anger would come later. Right now, there was just the hollow recognition that trust, once broken, couldn't be reassembled. Ryan pulled out his phone with shaking hands, dialed Williams, while Alex recorded the confession on her own device. Legal evidence that would hold up in court, protect Morrison Construction from liability, and probably send a 24-year-old kid to jail. Williams arrived within 30 minutes, took Ryan into custody after getting his formal statement. As the squad car pulled away, Frank approached with the rest of the crew watching from a respectful distance. We all heard. Ryan's out, effective immediately? Yeah. I'll put together his termination paperwork today. Frank's expression held grim satisfaction mixed with disappointment. Nobody liked being proven right when the proof meant betrayal from within. The guys are asking about their jobs. With Morrison talking about pulling contracts, about insurance not covering the losses, I'll handle Morrison. You keep the crew focused. We still have work to complete once Williams clears the scene. After Frank left, Alex touched Marcus's arm with fingers that burned even through flannel. I know that cost you. Loyalty matters to you. Having to choose between protecting Ryan and doing what's right? Don't. Just don't. Marcus pulled away from her touch, needing distance before he did something stupid, like accept comfort from the woman whose reappearance had preceded everything falling apart. You got your confession. Case solved. Morrison Construction is off the hook for inside theft. That's all this needed to be. Marcus, we agreed to keep it professional, so let's keep it professional. He walked toward his truck, leaving Alex standing in the November cold, watching him retreat the same way he'd watched her leave a decade ago. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The rest of the day passed in bureaucratic necessities, statements for Williams, insurance claim documentation, termination paperwork for Ryan that Marcus signed with a hand that felt disconnected from his body. Jim Morrison called to grunt something approximating approval that the theft had been solved and construction could resume, though his tone suggested Marcus's competence remained in question. By the time Marcus picked up Sophie from school, exhaustion had settled into his bones with the weight of concrete. His daughter emerged from the building with her usual explosion of energy, backpack bouncing against her spine as she ran toward the truck. Daddy, we're doing fractions in math, and I actually understand them. Her enthusiasm should have lifted his mood. Instead, it just highlighted the contrast between her uncomplicated joy and the wreckage of his professional life. Marcus helped her into the truck, forced a smile that felt like moving rusty machinery. That's great, kiddo. Your teacher happy with your progress? Mrs. Patterson says I'm one of the best in the class. Can we stop at the library? I want books about chemical reactions for the volcano project. The request pinged something in Marcus's awareness. Chemical reactions. Alex had mentioned knowing about chemistry from her forensics background. Had she and Sophie talked during that brief encounter at the construction site? Was his 8-year-old already forming attachments to a woman who'd proven she could walk away when things got hard? Not today. We need to get home, start on homework.
Sophie's face fell, but she didn't argue. The kid had learned to read his moods, understood when pushing would accomplish nothing. They were halfway home when his phone rang. Claire's name on the screen sent dread spiraling through Marcus's gut. She never called during his custody time unless something was wrong. "We need to talk. Now." Her voice carried the particular edge that meant fury barely controlled, the kind that preceded legal threats and custody modifications. "I'm with Sophie. Can this wait?" "No, pull over." Marcus found a gas station, parked under fluorescent lights that buzzed with electrical complaint. Sophie watched him with wide eyes that saw too much, understood more than he wanted her to. "Stay here, baby. I'll be right back." Outside the truck, Marcus pressed the phone to his ear and braced for impact. Claire's words came rapid fire, each one sharpened by anger. "Sophie came home from your place last week talking about Miss Sterling, the nice lady who knows about volcanoes and chemistry. The pretty lady with the fancy car. Want to tell me when our daughter met your ex-fiancé?" Marcus's mind scrambled for explanation, landed on partial truth that felt like complete deception. Alex stopped by the construction site on business. Sophie was there for maybe 5 minutes when Martha brought her by. They barely spoke. But enough that Sophie thinks she's wonderful. Enough that she's asking me questions about why you never talk about Miss Sterling if she's so nice. Claire's voice climbed toward the register that preceded ultimatums. "I Googled her, Marcus. Alexandra Sterling, Chief Security Officer at Sterling Wade. Net worth $40 million. The woman who left you 3 weeks before your wedding." The dollar amount shouldn't have surprised him. Part 1 had established Alex's wealth. But hearing Claire state it so bluntly emphasized the gulf between his world and Alex's. "She's investigating thefts at Morrison Construction. Professional contact only." Professional contact that has our daughter talking about her like she's already part of our lives? Do you understand what this does to me? I left for 2 years. I was a terrible mother. I'm trying to make up for that. And now Sophie's got this glamorous, brilliant woman to compare me against. The vulnerability underneath Claire's anger hit Marcus harder than accusations would have. She was scared. Not of losing custody, but of losing Sophie's affection to someone who represented everything Claire wasn't. Wealthy, successful, the kind of woman who solved crimes and commanded respect. "Claire, I'm not trying to replace you in Sophie's life. Alex is investigating a case, that's all. That's never all with you two. I saw how you were after she left. I spent our entire marriage knowing I was second choice. I won't put Sophie through watching you repeat that pattern." The truth of it stole Marcus's breath. Claire had known. All 6 years of their marriage, she'd understood she was a placeholder for the woman Marcus couldn't forget. "I'm calling my lawyer. I want the custody arrangement modified. Full custody with supervised visitation until you can prove you're not exposing Sophie to unstable influences." "Claire, please. I should have done this when we divorced. Should have protected Sophie from exactly this. But I thought you'd gotten past it. Thought you were stable enough to co-parent effectively. I was wrong." The line went dead. Marcus stood under buzzing fluorescent lights, watching traffic pass on the highway, feeling his carefully constructed life continue its collapse. Inside the truck, Sophie pressed her face against the window, concern written across features too young to carry this kind of worry. He climbed back in, forced normalcy into his voice. "Everything okay?" "Mom's mad at me, isn't she?
Because I talked to Miss Sterling. The perceptiveness of 8-year-olds never ceased to amaze and terrify Marcus in equal measure. Mom's not mad at you. She's worried. Grown-up stuff that's complicated. Is Miss Sterling bad? Because she seemed nice. She knew about chemical bonds and electron sharing and everything. So they had talked. More than Marcus realized. Enough for Sophie to form impressions and attachments that would complicate everything if Alex disappeared again. She's not bad, just complicated. Grandma says complicated is code for makes your dad sad. I don't want you to be sad, Daddy. Marcus pulled Sophie into a hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, grounding himself in the one uncomplicated truth of his existence. This child needed him stable and present and whole. I'm not sad, baby girl. Just tired. Long week at work. But Sophie pulled back, fixing him with eyes that saw through parental deflection. You can tell me the truth. I'm not a baby. The temptation to actually explain, to unload about Alex and Claire and custody threats and betrayals at work, pressed against Marcus's better judgment. Sophie was 8. She deserved to believe her parents had everything under control, that the adult world operated according to rules that made sense. How about we go home, make dinner, and you can show me what you learned about fractions? Sophie accepted the deflection with the resigned understanding of a child who'd learned when battles were worth fighting. They drove home in silence, broken only by radio static and the hum of tires on pavement. Legal papers arrived by courier the next morning, delivered to the construction site with timing calculated to maximize humiliation. Frank witnessed the exchange, said nothing, but his expression conveyed exactly how he felt about Claire's decision to serve Marcus at work. The petition cited exposing minor child to unstable romantic relationships that prioritize the father's emotional needs over the child's welfare. Christine Morrison, no relation to Jim Morrison, had crafted language that painted Marcus as selfish and reckless, a father so consumed by resurrecting a failed relationship that he'd forgotten his primary obligation to Sophie. Morrison himself appeared at the site around noon, read the tension in Marcus's posture, and made his own conclusions. Personal problems affecting your work, Dalton? No, sir. Everything's under control. Better be. We're already behind schedule and over budget. Can't afford distractions. After Morrison left, Frank approached with coffee Marcus hadn't asked for, but desperately needed. Crew's talking. About the lawyer papers, about Ryan getting arrested, about the investigator lady who keeps showing up. Let them talk. They're worried, boss, about their jobs, about whether Morrison's going to use all this chaos as excuse to bring in new management. The observation landed with the force of recognition. Frank was right. Marcus's personal drama had become professional liability. The theft, Ryan's arrest, Claire's custody petition, Alex's investigation, all of it created the appearance of a foreman who couldn't maintain control over his own life, let alone a construction site. I'll handle it. Morrison's not replacing anyone. We're going to finish this project on time and under budget if it kills us. And the custody thing? Marcus took a long drink of coffee, let the heat burn away some of the numbness that had settled over him. Hearings in 4 weeks. I've got time to figure it out. Boss, if you need anything, I need you keeping the crew focused, that's all. The rest is my problem. Days blurred into each other. Work, Sophie's routine, avoiding phone calls from Alex that he let go to voicemail, consultation with a family lawyer who charged $300 an hour to tell Marcus that Claire had legitimate concerns and the court would likely order evaluation of Sophie's home environment before making any custody modifications. Sophie herself seemed to sense the tension, grew quieter during their evenings together, completed homework without her usual questions and commentary. Marcus caught her drawing pictures during dinner, stick figures labeled Daddy, Mommy, and a third figure in business clothes with Miss Sterling written above it in careful child handwriting. "Can I ask you something?" Sophie's voice pulled him from contemplating bills he couldn't afford to pay, legal fees that would wipe out what remained of his savings. "Always." "If Miss Sterling makes you happy, why does that make everyone mad?" The question crystallized everything into painful clarity. An 8-year-old could see what the adults were too damaged to acknowledge, that happiness shouldn't be controversial, that the possibility of joy after years of going through motions should be celebrated rather than litigated. It's complicated because sometimes people hurt each other even when they don't mean to. Miss Sterling and I have history. Mommy's worried that history might happen again and hurt people. Would it hurt me? Marcus set down the bills, gave Sophie his full attention. "I would never let anyone hurt you. You're the most important person in my life. Everything I do is to make sure you're safe and loved." "But you're sad a lot, even when you try to hide it." The observation hit harder than any legal petition. Sophie had been watching him closely enough to see through the masks he wore, the false cheerfulness he projected to convince her everything was fine. Sometimes grown-ups carry worry that makes them seem sad, but that doesn't mean I'm not happy to have you.
Sophie climbed into his lap despite being almost too big for it, wrapped thin arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "I love you, Daddy. I just want you to smile for real again." Marcus held his daughter, felt something crack in the carefully maintained walls around his heart, and wondered when exactly he'd stopped believing he deserved happiness. His phone buzzed late that night, after Sophie had gone to bed.
Alex's name on the screen sent Marcus's pulse racing despite his better judgment. "I heard about the custody petition." Her voice carried genuine distress, stripped of professional polish. "Word travels fast." "I'm sorry. This is my fault. I came back, I investigated your site, I put you in this position." "You didn't do anything wrong. Claire's scared. I get it." Silence stretched across the line, filled with everything they weren't saying. Finally, Alex spoke again, each word chosen with obvious care. "I could testify. Tell the court our contact has been purely professional. That might help." "Would that be the truth?" The question hung between them, weighted with the dinner at Tony's Italian, the confessions exchanged, the way his heart still raced when she was near, despite a decade of trying to kill that particular feeling. It would be the truth as it exists right now, in this moment. We haven't defined what's happening between us. No relationship, just possibility. Marcus recognized the legal parsing, the way Alex could shape truth to serve objectives while technically maintaining honesty. FBI training applied to personal complications. "Don't testify. It'll just make things worse. Claire's lawyers would tear apart your history with me, make it seem like you're lying to protect me." "Then what can I do?" The genuine desire to help in her voice made refusing harder. Marcus wanted to accept, wanted to lean on someone who understood the weight he carried. But Sophie came first. Always. "Nothing. There's nothing you can do except maybe stay away until after the hearing. Give Claire no ammunition to use against me." "Marcus, please, Alex. I'm barely holding it together here. Don't make this harder than it already is." She was quiet for long enough that Marcus thought she'd hung up. Then her voice came through, soft and devastated. "Okay. I'll keep my distance. But if you need anything..." "I know. Thank you." The call ended. Marcus sat in his dark kitchen, staring at Sophie's drawings still on the table, wondering how his life had become so thoroughly complicated by the return of someone who'd walked away when walking should have been impossible. The next 2 weeks passed in careful avoidance. Alex stayed away from the construction site, sent associates to complete the theft investigation. Marcus focused on work with single-minded intensity, pushing the crew to make up lost time, proving to Morrison that personal chaos wouldn't affect professional performance. Sophie's school called on a Tuesday. The principal's voice carried the particular tone that meant trouble. "Mr. Dalton, there's been an incident. Sophie pushed another student during recess. We need you to come pick her up." Marcus arrived to find his daughter sitting in the office with tear-streaked face and defiant posture. The other child, Tyler Matthews, sat across the room with his mother, sporting a bloody nose and the satisfaction of someone who'd won through victimhood. Principal Anderson gestured Marcus into her office, Sophie following with head down and shoulders hunched. "Sophie has been exemplary all year. This behavior is completely out of character. Can you tell me what's going on at home?" The question felt loaded with implication. News of custody battles traveled through school systems, teachers gossiping in lounges about which families were fracturing. "Nothing unusual. Standard co-parenting with my ex-wife." Sophie mentioned that her mother was upset about something, that there might be changes to her living situation. Marcus's hands clenched into fists under the desk. How much had Sophie overheard? How many adult conversations had she absorbed while pretending to do homework, storing away ammunition for her own anxiety? "There's a custody hearing scheduled, but it's routine. Nothing for Sophie to worry about." "Mr. Dalton, children Sophie's age are remarkably perceptive. If there's instability at home, it will manifest in their behavior." The principal's well-meaning concern felt like accusation. Marcus was failing. As a father, as a provider of stability, as someone capable of protecting his daughter from the chaos adults created. "Can I talk to her?" "Of course. She's suspended for 3 days. School policy on physical altercations." Outside, Sophie sat with her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who offered Marcus a sympathetic smile. "Sophie's been distracted lately, not completing homework, seeming anxious. I wanted to reach out, but didn't want to overstep. I appreciate you caring. We're going through some adjustments at home. I'll make sure she catches up on her work." The drive home passed in thick silence. Sophie stared out the window, refusing to make eye contact. Marcus let the quiet stretch, waiting for her to break first. Finally, "Tyler said kids with divorced parents are broken, that we don't have real families." The words punched air from Marcus's lungs. 8 years old and already absorbing societal judgment about family structure, internalizing shame about circumstances she hadn't chosen. "What did you say?" "That he was wrong. That you and Mommy both love me, even if you don't live together. That we're a real family, just different." Pride mixed with heartbreak at Sophie's attempt to defend their situation. "And then?" "He said at least his parents didn't fight over him. That at least he wasn't being traded back and forth like nobody really wanted him." The cruelty of children never ceased to amaze Marcus. Tyler had found the exact wound to press, the fear every child of divorce carried, that they were burden rather than blessing, obligation rather than desire. So I pushed him, and he fell and got a bloody nose, and now I'm suspended, and Mommy's going to be so mad. Sophie's words dissolved into sobs. Marcus pulled over, unbuckled her seatbelt, and pulled his daughter into his arms across the console. "Listen to me. Tyler was wrong, completely wrong. You are wanted. By me, by your mom, by Grandma Martha. You're not broken. Our family looks different than Tyler's, but that doesn't make it less real." "Then why is everyone fighting? Why is Mommy trying to take me away from you?" The question deserved honesty, even if truth was complicated, because grown-ups sometimes get scared and make mistakes. "Mommy's worried that I'm not making good choices. She wants to protect you." "From what?" "From heartbreak. From watching Marcus repeat patterns with Alex. from instability that came from fathers who couldn't let go of women who'd proven they could leave, from uncertainty. And she's not entirely wrong. Things have been complicated lately. Sophie pulled back, steadied his face with unsettling intensity. Because of Miss Sterling? Not a question, a statement delivered with 8-year-old certainty. Partly, yeah. Do you love her? The directness stole Marcus's breath. No 8-year-old should have to ask their parents such questions, navigate such complicated emotional terrain. It's more complicated than love. We have history. We hurt each other. And I'm not sure if that's something you can fix, or if you're just setting yourself up to be hurt again. Sophie processed this with the gravity of someone much older. Grandma says you deserve to be happy, that you've been sad too long. Marcus pulled Sophie close again, breathing in strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence, wishing he could protect her from ever having to make choices between safety and possibility. Right now, all I care about is making sure you're okay. That's what matters. They drove home, the suspension notice burning a hole in Marcus's pocket, another piece of evidence for Claire's lawyers that his personal chaos was affecting Sophie. That night, he helped her with homework, made her favorite dinner, tucked her in with extra time for bedtime stories. After Sophie fell asleep, Marcus stood in her doorway watching her breathe, steady and peaceful in ways he never felt anymore. His phone sat heavy in his pocket, Alex's #1 touch away. The temptation to hear her voice nearly overwhelming. He didn't call. Instead, he went to the kitchen, poured whiskey he barely tasted, and stared at legal documents that outlined exactly how he might lose the most important person in his life, because he couldn't stop wanting the woman who'd destroyed him once before. The knock at his door came just after 9. Marcus wasn't expecting anyone. Sophie was asleep, and caution had him checking the window before opening. Alex stood on his porch, hair loose and rain-dampened, wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look younger than her 36 years, vulnerable in ways the corporate investigator never allowed. I know you said to stay away. Her voice carried apology and defiance in equal measure. I know this makes everything worse, but I heard about Sophie's suspension and I couldn't not check on you. Every rational part of Marcus's brain screamed to send her away, maintain boundaries, protect what remained of his custody position. He stepped back, let her in anyway. Inside his modest home, so different from her penthouse world, Alex looked around with the kind of attention that cataloged details. Sophie's backpack by the door, artwork covering the refrigerator, comfortable chaos of a single father doing his best. Is she okay? She will be. Kid at school said cruel things about divorce. Sophie defended herself physically instead of walking away. That's not her fault. She's processing trauma the adults in her life created. The observation was accurate enough to sting. Marcus poured himself another whiskey, didn't offer Alex one, needing the distance alcohol provided. Claire's lawyers are going to use this. 3-day suspension, evidence of behavioral problems, proof that Sophie's environment is unstable. Alex moved closer, close enough that Marcus could smell her perfume underneath the rain, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her body. Let me testify. Let me tell the court the truth, that our contact has been professional, that you're an exceptional father, that Sophie's suspension resulted from bullying, not parental failure. And when Claire's lawyers ask about our history, when they ask if you abandoned me 3 weeks before our wedding, when they paint you as unstable and me as stupid enough to get involved with you again. The words came out harsher than intended, fueled by whiskey and exhaustion and fear that everything he'd built was crumbling. Alex flinched, but didn't retreat. Then I'll tell them I made the worst mistake of my life, and I've spent 10 years regretting it. I'll tell them you deserve happiness, and Sophie deserves to see her father actually living instead of just surviving. Marcus set down his glass before he could throw it, before frustration found outlet in violence against inanimate objects. You don't get it. Sophie comes first, always. Not my happiness, not whatever this is between us. Her well-being is the only thing that matters. I know that. It's one of the things Alex cut herself off. Whatever she'd been about to say swallowed back. But Marcus could fill in the blank. One of the things she loved about him. One of the reasons walking away had been so hard. One of the qualities that made him different from the men in her corporate world who prioritized ambition over everything. You should go. But he didn't move toward the door. Didn't create physical distance that would make leaving easier. They stood in his kitchen with 3 feet between them, charged air crackling with 10 years of unresolved longing. Alex closed the distance, hand rising to touch his face with fingers that trembled slightly. I meant what I said at dinner. Every word. I built an empire, and I'm still lonely. I have everything I thought I wanted, and it means nothing because you're not there. Alex. She kissed him before he could finish the objection, soft and tentative, asking permission even as she took what she wanted. Marcus's body responded before his brain could intervene, hands finding her waist, pulling her closer, a decade of denial exploding into desperate contact. The kiss deepened. Alex's fingers tangled in his hair, Marcus's hands sliding under her sweater to find skin that burned against his palms. Years of carefully maintained distance evaporated, replaced by need and want, and the dangerous belief that maybe this time could be different. Daddy? Sophie's voice from the hallway shattered the moment like glass. They sprang apart, both breathing hard, Marcus's heart hammering against his ribs. His daughter stood in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, taking in the scene with the kind of processing that would lead to questions he wasn't prepared to answer. Baby, you should be asleep. I had a bad dream about Tyler saying mean things. Sophie's attention shifted to Alex, recognition lighting her features. Miss Sterling, you came to visit. The uncomplicated joy in Sophie's voice created its own devastation. His daughter liked Alex, felt comfortable with her, was already forming attachments that would hurt when, not if, when, Alex disappeared again. Alex recovered faster than Marcus, smoothing her clothes and stepping back to create appropriate distance. Hi, Sophie. I just stopped by to talk to your dad about work. I should probably go. Do you have to? I wanted to show you my rock collection. I found one with crystals in it. The earnest invitation in Sophie's voice made Marcus's chest ache. 8 years old and already trying to build bridges between the adults whose complicated relationship threatened to tear her world apart. Maybe another time. You need to get back to sleep. Okay. Will I see you again? Alex glanced at Marcus, seeking permission he couldn't give without compromising everything. I hope so. After Alex left, Marcus tucked Sophie back into bed.